Hello, everybody. I hope you are all safe and fine, and I hope you're all taking all the necessary precautions regarding the recent outbreak of the coronavirus. And don't forget to wear masks and wash your hands as much as you can. Yeah, that's it. And I also hope you enjoyed my last video on income distribution. Today, in this video, I'm going to talk about a very interesting concept, a concept that almost everybody talks about. I mean, whenever you are a politician, you are a sociologist, you are an economist, you are a person, you at least talk about it once in a while. And that's the concept of development, something that has been misunderstood for a long time in many different circles. What is development? And what is a developing country? What is an underdeveloped country? What is a developed country? Well, for starters, let me make you understand some common mistakes amongst different circles regarding this concept. First of all, third world nations doesn't mean developing or underdeveloped nations. During the Cold War, the whole country, the whole world, and all of the countries were divided into three groups. The first world nations, who were followers of capitalism and liberalism and its teachings. The second world nations, who were the followers of communism, Marxism, like the Soviet Unions, China, Cuba. And third world nations were the countries who did not pick a side, who decided to be neutral in that fight. But I don't know why, after a while, it changed, and nowadays everybody uses the term third world for countries that are lower on the spectrum of development or growth. So that's the first mistake I hope I made you never make again. Now, what is development anyways? Second one, there is no developed country. No country is developed, and no country is underdeveloped. Countries are all developing because development is a dynamic process. It keeps changing. It keeps going forward or backward depending on what the country is doing. So when we talk about development, we are talking about the process. Yes, some countries are further ahead in that process, on that route. Some are not. But in retrospect, all of them are walking that path, and none of them are standing still or going backward. So every country is developing. Now, some countries are more developed than others in some aspects, not all aspects. For example, yes, the United States is really strong in terms of industry and military technology, maybe. Okay, but in terms of life security, it falls behind Switzerland or even Taiwan. On the other hand, in terms of happiness, it falls behind Denmark and Finland. So, what you called, what I wish you to realize here is the fact that developed is a myth, and some countries are more developed, but they are all developing countries. Now, because some of them are too far ahead in that path, there is a distinction between those who are not, which are usually called developing, and those who are far ahead, which are called industrial countries. So remember that the next time you're talking about development. Hopefully you will do that because it's a very interesting concept actually. It's really fun to talk about development. Now, uh, one big issue when you are talking about development and everything is the fact that how do you assess development? I mean, first you must define development, but then you need an index, a number, a figure that shows you how much developed you are. I mean, when we talk about individual development, well, we have indexes, your GPA, grade point average, your level of education given your age, your health. These are indexes you can use to show you are developed individually. But what about in real life? How do we show we are developed in a real life situation? How do we show how much developed our society and our country is? Well, there are many different indexes that have been indicators that have been uh, introduced as indicators of development. For starters, usually GDP per capita. I mean, how much one earns uh, on average in a country is considered a very common index of development. But it does have its limits because, first off, just because the GDP per capita in a country of 50 million people is 5,000 US dollars, it doesn't mean every single one of them is earning $5,000. You must also take into account the distribution of income here, because if income distribution is not as equal as it should be, you may find people who are earning $50 while others are earning $500,000, and the average is still 5,000. But you do have a very wide spectrum here. So GDP per capita, even though a good index for starters, is not a very comprehensive index. So why? Because it lacks any indicator of inclusiveness, any indicator of equal income distribution, or even fair income distribution. So that is one reason we cannot use GDP per capita or GDP growth as an index alone, I mean. On the other hand, we have something that's called the Human Development Index. It was created and designed by the United Nations Development Program, and it is a combination of life expectancy, how much you expect to live before you punch the clock and die, your education, your health, and your income. It's a more or less good indicator, but still, it's not as comprehensive as one hopes such an index to be. You need to add other options. Just having education doesn't mean having a good life. Okay, some people may have PhDs and still work in mines because there is no job for a PhD in their society. Some people may have no education but earned millions of dollars every day because they are trading goods, they are trading drugs, narcotics every day for living. So besides numbers, the meaning behind those numbers is also quite important. You need to know how each person is living. That's actually one of the biggest critics of this index and any other index for that matter, because whether you like it or not, numbers are just numbers. Okay, for example, let's say unemployment rate is 20%. Okay, so 20% of people every year fail to find a job. Okay, but what about those 80% that do find a job? What kind of a job do they find? How much is compatible with their living conditions, with their qualifications? Take me, for instance. I come from a country that many of our taxi drivers are highly educated. For many years, we had master's degrees and PhDs who were driving taxis. Why? Because there was no job for a master's degree in history or a PhD in philosophy. There was no job for such a person. So the society lacked what it needed, what was necessary for it to develop in that area. So when you are designing and defining an index for development, you do need a way to make sure you take into account its every aspect of development. It needs to be a really comprehensive index. The most comprehensive index I've ever seen is the power index in a website called Lowy Institute, which is an estimate of each country, each state's power in Asia, in part of Asia, East Asia, and it has 128 sub indicators. So it's not an easy job defining the status of countries' development. You need a comprehensive index to make sure it includes everything, not just one or two or three aspects. One key term in development, one other key concept in development, which is kind of on the rise these days, is sustainable development. Sustainable development means not only the development status needs to be economic, it also needs to be environmental. What does that mean? It means your objectives for today must not prevent next generations to gain their objectives. You cannot, for example, you cannot earn high rates of growth by polluting the water supplies or depleting natural resources, because none of them are yours alone. They are yours and your children's and your grandchildren's and your grandchildren's and so on and so forth. So what I'm trying to say here is the fact that you need to take into account the needs of the coming generations. And if you do that, you are on the path of sustainable development. That also has the problem of index definition, because quantifying any of these concepts means a big drag. You have to take into account so many different aspects, and it's not always that easy to quantify some of those aspects. For example, happiness. Happiness actually is a key indicator in development. But how do you estimate happiness? Ask yourself, how do you define happiness? And how do you quantify happiness? I mean, how much happy are you? And how much happy am I? And are you happier than I am? If so, how much? It's not that easy to create such indexes. It's actually quite difficult. Anyways, I'm running out of time. What I wanted to say to you today in this video was to introduce to you a new concept which I think we all need to have a gross understanding of, and that's development. because these days we love dividing. We keep dividing countries: developed, developing, industrial, underdeveloped, poor, rich, middle income. We love dividing the countries based on their status. And one terrible and sad result of that division is the fact that instead of building the poor countries, people from those countries just flee. They just migrate and go to another country that is more developed. Instead of making your home better, you just leave and seek shelter in another's home. And that's actually one of the key problems in our society. A key problem that I hope one day stops. I really hope one day, instead of migrating to other countries, we remain in our own countries. Instead of escaping our never-ending dooms and going and trying to build a life elsewhere, I hope one day we actually stay where we are. Instead of painting others' houses, I wish we built our own in our own land for ourselves, not for others. Yes, that's a possibility. That's a dream, actually, because there are so many things in the way of such a dream becoming a reality. On one hand, we do have the problem of weak institutions. Not every country has a very good political structure, a very good economy, a very good social structure. But who is going to fix those if we all run away? If we all leave, then who is going to fix those? Who? Ask yourself this. Who? Thank you for listening.